Hello and welcome to week 13 in behavior management. And just some right off the bat here, I gotta own some lack of productivity here, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about in this chapter. I apologize for not getting to grading some assignments here. I will be focusing much more energy this week to catch up on that. We are in week 13, taking on the last chapter of content. Now, I've gone ahead and made a slight adjustment to the schedule of events here, and I took the final assignment, your personal behavior management plan, and I made that due next week, not at the end of this coming week. So you have an extra week to get that done, an extra week to reach out to me, an extra week to make sure you have data that you've implemented the plan. I mean, please read that assignment. We're going to be going. I'm going to be expecting that to come to me next week. If you have completed it and you are set to submit it, then by all means go ahead and do that. That will be the last assignment of the class for this week. Now the only thing that is due is going to be chapter 13 discussion, and I was very tempted, been tempted for a while, to actually turn this into an assignment. Probably will next time, but here we are. Some background to the content of this chapter. The content here has to do with human performance factors and human factors engineering, which is a field of study that I was introduced to several years ago. And I would really like to share with you the backstory on that. I had and have a master's degree in counseling and psychiatric rehabilitation, did that as my first career. When I started teaching full time, I was teaching psychology, developmental sociology, and eventually some mental health classes that really sort of took advantage of the fact that I had a mental health degree. I came to somewhat of a realization that unlike the public school system, professors, and maybe this will be obvious, professors are not required necessarily to take courses on how to teach. In a public school system, they have to be certified teachers, usually getting a degree in education, how to teach subjects. So in college, they focus on expertise and they leave teaching essentially to the individual to figure out. Now, I've always been a public speaker. I've always been interested in teaching. I was a trainer in many, many ways. So I felt pretty comfortable in the role of standing up in front of people and professing. Now, at the same time, I also felt that maybe I could benefit from some other training, but I didn't want to go get another bachelor's degree in education, didn't want to get a master's degree in education. Started looking around at different programs, and I happened across a master's degree in uh, instructional and performance technology at Boise State University in Boise, Idaho. It's an online program. The whole thing looked pretty cool to me. And I ended up enrolling and eventually, of course, graduating from that program with a master's in instructional and performance technology. And it has shown to be the most useful degree in my day-to-day activities as an instructor, as a human being. It was just a whole new world opened up to me, and that world was performance engineering. Now, to kind of place this in its context, performance engineering and behavior management coexisted. Behavior management and behaviorism and whatnot was in the clinical world and was in the educational world. But in the turn of the century, when the last turn of the century, not the most, not the most recent one, way back, turn of the century. The the Industrial Revolution created the notion that a human being, as part of a mechanism of production, can be enhanced the same way that we might enhance the efficiency of a machine. If we create an efficient machine, we get more product. Get more product, we sell more, we make more money. So here we have this, labor force, and the brilliant people of the day decided to take this knowledge base that we had about behaviorism and the beginnings of all that, the early psychology. These are happening at the same time. In fact, I think performance engineering was going on a little bit before, because we're really looking at the onset of the Industrial Revolution, a little into the Industrial Revolution actually, and the application of those principles toward efficient work. And it's a whole other direction in which science went, which I was totally unaware of that. And from those kinds of studies, we get studies of motivation, productivity, reward cycles. The very reason why we're able to tolerate in many, many jobs in this country that we only get paid every other week, sometimes just once a month. The reason why that works is because it was tested within the field of performance. We also get, and this is sort of what attracted me, we also get the whole notion of ergonomics and workplace organization, the actual making sure people have the tools that they need, the parts that they need, all within reach, without being able to create too many stretches and injuries, because injuries reduce productivity. Now, the really cool thing about that entire field is that these methods were so successful that businesses were readily able to invest lots of money to have people come in and do these analyses to their workers. Because if I have a factory and I have 100 people doing something, and I can make those 100 people 10% more efficient, that is a huge change in the amount of productivity I can get out of my workers for the same price, simply by making their work more efficient. In that world, I was exposed to classmates who were not educators as I was, but they were trainers within industry. They were industrial psychologists who are working in industry to work on people's motivation and whatnot, all related to work. And I found it really, really fascinating to take all of that and then analyze things like what motivates someone to do well in school. What are the factors that contribute to someone doing well in school? Now, one of the models that I came across, probably one of the most influential models within that world. Again, I come from a psychological behavior background. This was all new, and here comes this model of, I'd never heard of it, yet it was very behavioral in its context, looking at individuals and the environments in which they exist. And that is the behavioral engineering model, the BEM. Okay, and that was developed by Gilbert, a researcher, and it positions, it's a tool that someone can use to analyze a performance problem. Now, performance on a psychological level is important, not only because of the efficiency of systems to produce products for wealth generation and profit and whatnot, all great things. People who maintain a high level of productivity, whatever that is, It doesn't necessarily need to be your job. It's a project. Like, you get a lot of your to-do list done on a regular basis. If you're productive, science has shown us that people are happier, they're more satisfied with life, they're less prone to depression, they enjoy more positive relationships, and of course they make more money. So it was kind of this whole other field that sort of added to what I was already understanding in terms of motivation and people's behavior. Now, clinically, and this is really where the BEM comes in. Clinically, you can look at your own productivity. You can imagine yourself as a supervisor, and you have an employee that's just not doing it, kind of thing. Or you have a team that's just not making snuff, or you as an individual are not seeming to get everything that you want done. And this clinical tool, the BEM, comes in, and you can ask questions about environment and personal aspects of this situation in order to diagnose the problem. So, I give you the BEM. So this chart, what it does across the horizontal top axis are 3 areas that are important in analyzing performance. The first has to do with information. This is data, knowledge associated with the task. Then we look at tools, resources, capacity. These are the instruments that you need to do a good job. And finally, get into the psychology here, the motivating factors. Why would someone want to be more productive? Now, we're going to look at each one of these areas, and this is where it sort of gets behavioral. We're going to look at the environmental parts of that, and then we're going to look at the individual parts of this. So, in terms of this class, the environmental part would be the behavioral part. The individual part is us actually looking into the black box that I mentioned so much earlier. So it's a little extension on behaviorism. It's not pure behaviorism, because we are going to take into consideration an evaluation of the individual. And I think this gives us a very, very comprehensive view of behavior performance issues. Okay, so we're looking at the environment and the individual. So let's take a deep dive in each one of these, and these are examples, the kind of things that the questions we would ask. Assume for a moment, let's say you're having trouble getting everything on your to-do list done. You have your thing, you line them up, and it's just not happening. So let's use that as an example and walk through all the different questions we can. And I'll give examples. I'll make up examples about, where would, we'll look at information environment. How would that maybe manifest as the reason why you're having trouble getting through your whole to-do list in a day? And then instrumentation and motivation. And then we'll look at the individual, from that perspective. So let's take a look here. We start off with this first one. We're looking at the environment and the data about your to-do list. Okay, we're assuming you're not doing well on the to-do list. So, is there relevant and frequent feedback about your performance? Is there descriptions of what is expected of performance? Are there clear and relevant guides to adequate performance? This really speaks to your to-do list being specific. This is the dead man's test and stranger test. Is it really clear what you're supposed to do? Or just that you say something, let's say you have cleaned the house. Maybe that's just not specific enough and things need to get more detailed. Maybe maybe you don't have a list and it's time to, the first one, not enough feedback on it, or you need an accountability person to kind of like, hey, and you put the list on the fridge and you get that, get that done. um, is it clear what's on your list, or is it pretty vague? So that maybe, so sometimes when you have those vague ones and it says, in my office here, my home office, I'll say clean my office, but maybe what I need to is get clear about that. So today I'm going to vacuum the rug in my office. Then tomorrow I'm going to organize the bookshelf in the office, and get much more specific. And that might be the source of that performance problem. Now let's look, same issue. We're going to look at the environment. What about the tools? Okay, do you have the tools, the resources, the time, materials in order to do your list? This is the time thing. Are you setting time aside? It might coincide with another one from the previous. If I say I'm going to clean my office and I look at that item might become overwhelming because I only have half an hour. So I need to break that down into something I can do in half an hour. And that allows me to be able to check something off my to-do list. Do I have, if I'm going to vacuum the rug, is there a vacuum that I can easily bring up to my office here? It's above my garage. And in fact, I ended up buying my own vacuum just for this room. So I didn't have to haul the vacuum up back and forth, buy a little cheapy vacuum so I can, quickly go through and vacuum. Are the tools there? Is everything available? If I'm going to clean up things, do I have a trash can to put things in? Or am I just going to be moving them from one place to the other? Kind of thing. Do I have bins? Do I have shelves to organize items in my office? I'm focusing on the office, but it can be anything on your list. And next, we look at incentives. Now, this kind of deals with work. So there are financial incentives, non-monetary incentives, career development, clear consequences for poor performance. Now, and this has a lot to do with. Sorry, got my buttons a little mixed up here. So motivation, we have financial, non-monetary incentives, career development, clear consequences for poor performance. This might be holding yourself accountable. That there would be a say you could develop consequences for your to-do list. You could take, if I at 80%, if I can get 80% of my to-do list done every day, then I earn this reward. And conversely, there is a consequence for poor performance. So there's an incentive for performance. So here we have our behavior plan laid out, clear description. You know exactly what to do, and you have consequences here. We have that behavioral plan ABC going right across here. Well, sort of. Other incentives to get that to-do list done. Is there values that you can attach to these things? Are there your to-do list? Being able to get things done, being able to make a nutritious meal. Some of you, maybe putting yourself on diet plans or exercise plans, and assigning value to those things in order to increase the motivation for you to do that to-do list. Now, what we've done so far is we've covered the environmental components of the behavioral engineering model, and we've looked at those three areas of information and the tools and motivation and incentives. Now, we're going to look at you analyzing. Now, think of this also in terms you're a supervisor and you're looking at the individual. So you look at the top, and that's what can the business do to increase the performance of this individual? Or what can you do to increase your performance on, what environmental factors can you manage in order to increase your performance on getting your to-do list done. Now let's look at you as an individual person. Do you know how to do all these things? Do you actually know how to conduct things that are on your to-do list? Now this, of course, really, you can see how this is a focus in industry. If you don't quite know how to build the widget that you're supposed to build, then you're not going to be productive. Are you in the right job? Are you the one that should be doing this? Do you have an item on your list and really that should belong to somebody else because they're good at it, or something? But one of the things that I learned in this degree program, and it's interesting because you see quite the opposite within, particularly within education, that addressing knowledge deficits through training is your last resort, should be your last resort, because within industry, now this is of course really funny, right? You think, well, you want to train people up, get them going, and of course that's important. But the problem with training as a focus on correcting performance issues is, first, it's expensive. Second, it's time consuming. So I would say, let's say you have an individual, they don't seem to be able to understand how to make it work. It's going to take a week of training. We have to pull them off the line, give them a week worth of training and stuff like that. It's going to cost us $2,000 for the trainer to come in and stuff like this. Then, and examples that were used in the courses that I took, we go up to the incentives on the other side in the environment. What if I went up to that employee who needs to get training but could potentially train themselves, and I say, you have 1 week to self-train yourself to this level of productivity, and if you do that, you get to keep your job first, and I'll give you $1,000 bonus. And we take that $2,000 time-intensive expense, we cut it in half, we give the individual the incentive to self-educate themselves and train themselves to get into that job, and they get a huge bonus for that. Wow, that is actually, in many cases, not in all, of course, you have to train people on new systems and when they're on the job for the first time. But when you're looking at performance issues, sometimes training is not the answer. Sometimes it's something else that might even be cheaper. So as I've said flippantly in my class one time, I said, I leave it to my students, to learn, and this is common, to learn APA citation on their own. And I let the very small consequences of that guide the motivation. Now, the truth is, many people don't take the time to get into APA citation. And I guess over the course of an entire degree program, most college professors sort of assume that people will eventually get it right, like I did, by the end of their degree. You'll have gone through corrections and whatnot. Now imagine if I could do a training, on APA citation, but imagine if I had instead some funds, and I could say, right, and I would predict it would not even have to be that much. So let's say in Intro to Psych, the college is going to set aside $50 per student for this program. And we say to students, rather than giving you a training on this, we're going to expect that you're going to self-motivate yourself to apply, access resources on APA style and whatnot. And when you submit your first paper, it will be scored on a detailed analysis of APA citation. And if it scores above 90% compliance, you get $50. Now, $50 is not a lot of money, but it is a lot of money. And I would imagine, just imagine for yourself, maybe some of you would say, I don't care about the $50. But if a teacher went up to you and said, if you make this really good in APA, not only will you get a good grade, you're going to get $50 cash or a $50 bookstore certificate, or something like that. That might work better than training. Okay, back to the chart here. That's just a way that we can look at this. But here's, when we're looking at a performance problem, do you know how to do the things on your list? Are you the best person to be doing those things? Or is it a bad fit? This is why hiring is so important, getting the right person for the right job, and also assigning yourself the right items on your to-do list. Let's look at the next one here. Here we're looking at capacity, an individual's ability to actually do the job. Can they do it? Are there visual aids or tools to extend the human being to be able to do these jobs? So look at tools this way, like really like drills and robot arms and stuff like that. The physical shaping, the adaptation of the environment, the selection of individuals within, can the person actually do the job? And this one comes along pretty strong. Sometimes you say, the person simply does not have the capacity to do that job. Now, these are stark realities that people face over time, and we certainly don't like to preemptively tell someone that they don't have the capacity to do something, but that actually might be the solution. A person might get into a job, let's say, and they just like, I just can't do this. I can't do customer support. I hate it, and that individual is probably in the wrong job. And the sooner they can get out of there and find a job that they love, the better off for everybody. Now, in terms of your to-do list, you might find that kind of mechanism really isn't the way that you operate. Where you make a list and maybe you have to try it a different way. Maybe you have to schedule time. Maybe seeing a really long list is overwhelming and you need to break it down because of your own psychological needs. You're looking at environmental changes to the tools in order to address the fact that whenever I see my daily to-do list, it's overwhelming. That I have a set of to-do list, and I was going over those with my wife, some adjustments I was going to make with them, and to be more productive. And she said, if I saw this list every morning, I'd be overwhelmed and depressed. It's just too long. So she's saying, that's a barrier she would see. I just don't want to deal with that kind of weight of things hanging over me. For me, that list represents the order of things I'm going to do them that don't necessarily have to get done that day. They can carry into the next day. So I'm able to tolerate that longer list of things to do because I know it doesn't necessarily, it'd be cool, I try, but I don't have any emotional attachment to the fact of getting everything on that list done. Now, finally, in our analysis here, we look at the motivations for the work. Are you sufficiently motivated to get these things done on your list? Or do you just don't care about them? And that's can be, the thing. Or do you need, are there things on your to-do list that really require you to be in a behavior plan because the intrinsic value of getting those things done is not enough? It's not enough for me to clean the garage. I don't mind it being all messy. So if as a family you want me to clean the garage, I'm going to have to get some reward for that. There's going to have to be something in it for me. And again, here we come with that behavior management. Again, coming in, well, how can we set that up environmentally so that it addresses the fact that the intrinsic value of what you're doing is not high. So we have this tool. Let me go back to here. We have this tool where we can take an individual performance problem. It might be you just can't get that paper done. You're calling it procrastination. But procrastination is a performance issue. So if we're going to take us, like I keep putting off that major project, okay, let's look at what's going on. Let's take a look at that major project. And do you know exactly what you need to do? Do you have to read the instructions and get to know it? Do you have to ask some questions about what you want to do? We see that first here. Do you have the resources and the time to set aside to do this? Or have you've taken on too much and now you're having that stress? And finally, is there incentives enough for this? Is it a bigger part of the class that you want to get it done? Is it enough? Are you aware of the consequences? Maybe you haven't really done the calculation and you see that maybe for instance, you can't get above a C in the class. That you examine the negative consequences of not getting it done, and like kind of shock yourself into thinking about it. And then we could look at the individual ones. Do you need to learn how to do some things? Do you need to learn how to use computer resources? Do you need to learn how to write a title page, APA format, those kinds of things? Do you have the capacity to do this work? And I know that this one it can be a slight to the self-esteem, but a real honest look at your capacity to do this kind of work. And finally, are you sufficiently motivated by the topic itself? Does it have personal meaning? Now, some of these, when you're taking a class like this, it's a higher level class, your capacity's there. I wouldn't worry about capacity. I might worry about motivation, looking at these personal things. Like you might look at this, you might have picked something to change in your behavior, and it's not that big of a deal. Whereas, or the reinforcer's not that big of a deal. Okay, so I can't watch my TV show. Big deal. That's not, it just doesn't matter to me anymore. Or I don't mind how much I'm swearing. So that there's not enough, then you sort of pick the wrong thing to work on, as an assignment, at least. So, but capacity wise, having survived the courses that you've taken up until this time, you're probably well within the ability and capacity to do this. If you're looking at individual reasons why you might be procrastinating on major projects, you might look at your skill set, what you need to do in terms of your skill set, your personal investment in to the learning process involved in that project. And then you look to the top. Do you need to ask questions? Do you need to schedule time and get resources and stuff like that? And then do you need to alert yourself as to how important this is in the big picture? So I hope my energy about this comes across just and expresses my my joy in this model about how effective it can be in terms of addressing performance issues on the job, in industry, in your life, in your 9-year-old daughter, whatever. You can take this model and say, where's the problem? Because all of these need to be in place, according to the model, all of these need to be in place adequately in order for good performance to happen. So that's the goal. So it's tangential to the behavior management kind of thing that we've been doing, but it's a kind of a deep dive clinical analytical tool. Okay, moving right along. The only thing that's due this week is the discussion, where I'm going to ask you haphazardly. You don't have to go in to the discussion board and kind of do all of them. Go through them and maybe kind of diagnose a problem in your performance of some kind. So you might come to the conclusion that you don't understand an assignment, you don't understand what's expected, and that becomes uh, a data issue, information, environment, data. You can see those. You have data, resources, incentives, knowledge, capacity, and motives. Pick one or two that you think might be accurate descriptions, or maybe just one, and how you might address that in terms of addressing your performance issue. Now that this is, you can see where this might actually lean much more toward an assignment, but I'm not going to make that change at this point in the game, and we'll just discuss it, comment on each other's posts, and go from there. This will conclude the content of this class, except for the assignment, the personal change project, the major special assignment, getting that done by the end of next week, having that submitted to me. Please reach out if you have any questions about that. Schedule the time that you need. Going right through here is understand it is worth a lot in this class. Avail yourself of resources on how, both within the course book, but also external to the course book. Put your A game on. I know you're all capable of doing this, and take a deep dive into this opportunity for you to successfully manage a piece of your behavior and make yourself even better, if that's possible. So, have a great week. Again, please reach out if you have any questions about the ending of our course here. I will probably do one more video the beginning of next week, and then that will be the last video. This was actually going to be the last video, but 13's unlucky anyway, so I'll just go to 14. So I will see you online. Take care and have a great week.